It's now time for the Recovery Boys, Lewis Finch and Macon Moy, as they spend the next hour with you discussing the issues of alcoholism and drug addiction, as well as the road to recovery. Here's Lewis and Macon.
I'm Macon.
And I'm Lewis.
And
we're the Recovery Boys.
Hey, Lewis, how are you doing today?
Excellent.
You look a little tired, Lewis. You've been on an airplane, haven't you?
I have. It's, traveling at this age doesn't sit real well with me.
I hear you, brother. So one of the things that we, as part of our program here at Wellwind, is when we work with the family of somebody who's going through substance abuse or even a mental illness situation, which we certainly see our share of both of those, we will, if you engage us, we include the transportation. And so Lewis was actually in an airplane yesterday running and picking up one of our clients who has finished the first phase of their treatment. Isn't that right, Lewis?
Yep. Yeah, she was in treatment for a little over 30 days. And you getting yourself situated there?
Trying to,
okay.
brother. You know,
all right.
I'm a little bit taller.
Exactly. Yeah, she was in residential treatment for a little over 30 days and knocked the cobwebs off of her life and is back home and dealing with the real world now.
Yeah, so one of the things we want to do today in this podcast, first off, here we are in the first week of December. It's hard to believe that 2020 is almost finished. I can honestly say that 2020 has just sucked. And very few people will look back on 2020 with fond memories. It's really much more, there's all kinds of life-changing events that seem to have happened in 2020, but one of the things that hasn't changed is people's need to stop drinking, doing drugs, trying to get some help for habits that are taken away from their quality of life. But one of the things we want to do with this podcast is almost turn it into a commercial for Wellwind. And you know, Lewis founded Wellwind 5 years ago. He's helped God knows how many people since then, but one of the things that we constantly seem to have to explain to new clients or remind our old clients is that treatment is a process. It's not an event. And we're going to try and do a little bit of explaining that process today, because I can't tell you, and Lewis, I mean, we'll talk about it, but how many times have we had parents, spouses, friends think that 30 days, okay, when I get them back from 30 days, they're fixed, right?
All the time.
And so we want to
make
sure and explain to all those people out there watching us on this podcast that recovery is a lifetime event. It's not a timed event. And there are stages that happen. And it's so important, I think, that we do our best to educate people that we help as to what to expect. I think probably the biggest value we play to our clients is being able to give them answers to questions that they have been searching for a long time.
Well, and to that point, Macon, we usually tell people that if we can get you into recovery and you can be that way for at least a year, you've got a really, really good chance, 80, 90% chance of being clean and sober for the rest of your life. But you've got to be honest. You talk about this all the time. The very first concept with this recovery program is honesty.
It is. And, you know, we had one new client this week, and I don't know why, but it just struck me. I watched him. Came in here with some friends, a family member and another friend, and it was literally, I think, the first time that he ever admitted to the people that were with him, but I think it's probably the first time he ever admitted to himself that alcohol had his number. And it seemed almost like when he finally said that, I know personally when I said it to a doctor in Greenville, North Carolina in 2012, it was like I could breathe again.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a certain amount of freedom that being honest about something that you've been hiding for so long, it's hard to describe the experience. But I will tell you, I watched literally the lines and the scowl on his face softened, And
Yeah.
I was like, wow, man, that's really cool. And so the process that we described, the process that we'll go over today, is not complicated, but there's no variations allowed. You can't kind of be honest, and you can't. This is, I think that most of us, as in active addiction, alcoholism, we always are trying to survive moment to moment, trying to lie our way out of the trouble we've gotten ourselves into. That produces a little bit of freedom, and what we do with that freedom is we go right back to the well, and we get ourselves back in trouble.
Well, because addiction is a mental health issue. It's a brain disorder. You end up, in a lot of cases, where the client, the patient, is trying to diagnose and treat themselves, which never works. It never works. It's a recipe for disaster.
It is, and there's a process. One of the things that you'll hear us say all the time is that, especially when we're talking to families who have come to us for some intervention services, we explain to them how it's going to be complicated, difficult, and sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't, but most of the time when it is, it's because the affected party, the person of interest, has a love affair with their substance. I mean, alcohol, as I've heard Lewis say a million times, is their best friend, and we're getting ready to take their best friend away from them forever.
Well,
not for a short period of time.
No, forever. I mean, you and I have talked about this. You still can taste that last drink, right?
I can. I know because sometimes time doesn't work in your favor. I quickly forget all of the agony it caused and think about all of the pure comfort that came in the first 35, 40 seconds of a big swig of chilled down quality vodka, which was my poison. And let me make sure everybody understands, it's poison. It's not, and in all deference to we have plenty of friends who are normal, who drink responsibly. Our hats are off to them. We'd love to join you, but we're not. It's an invitation that didn't come our way. And also to the people who make it. I mean, we're not here to throw, to cast dispersions on the people who are in the industry. But for those of us that are sick, it is poison, and it'll kill you if you don't get your arms around it. And so, I think today what we'll do is we'll have a brief conversation about when we see families come into Wellwind and are asking us for help. It is it's sad.
Really sad.
It's sad, and they want to hear 9 times out of 10 they want to hear something different than what we tell them.
Most of them are looking for us to confirm what they already know, what they think they know.
Right.
And when you don't tell them that, it really disturbs them in a lot of cases. A lot of them just turn and walk away because they can't accept the fact that they're either their little bundle of joy or their spouse or whoever it is could actually be thinking and acting in a certain way.
That's right. It's a brain disease. It's a brain disorder. It is. There's a lot of ways you can get it, evidently. The scientific community or the medical community has come up with all kinds of percentages. It's 30% genetic, it's 40% life experiential, whatever the right answer is, because nobody really knows.
Right.
If you're an alcoholic, we understand you. If you're a drug addict, we understand you. Luckily, thank God for our society, it's a small number, 10%, 15% of the population can not drink or do drugs responsibly. I know do drugs responsibly. I'm talking about prescription drugs. It's funny. I had a medical procedure yesterday, and my doctor was determined to make it not a traumatic event for me, because apparently I'll end up having to have a couple more of these, maybe more than I want. And it's not very much fun what I did yesterday, but he prescribed for me a Valium.
Perfect.
Okay? A Valium.
Wow.
Which he called into the pharmacy. And so my sweet wife Taylor and I went by yesterday to pick it up, and I started laughing. I got a prescription for one pill. But even
for one pill.
Even the one pill,
Wow.
I would be lying to you if I didn't think about the night before, when am I going to take that pill and what's it going to do to me? So it confirmed that I'm a drug addict, still a drug addict, always will be a drug addict. So let's talk about that, Lewis. Let's talk about what happens with those folks. And professionally speaking, and we like to consider ourselves professionals in helping people, when we meet with somebody, sometimes residential treatment is needed, and sometimes it's not. But when residential treatment is needed, usually what is that for us, Lewis? I mean, what do we tell those folks that are faced with sending their? A lot of people are hoping at residential treatment because they want the affected person out of their hair for 30 days.
Exactly. Well, but it at best, it's a stabilization process.
Correct.
It warehouses the individual in a very safe environment where, in most cases, they can be detoxed. If you're going to a facility that has detox, which most of them do, but it gets them to a place where they're seen, where there are eyes on them 24 hours a day, and it's not impossible, but it's damn near impossible to drink and do drugs in residential treatment. Now, I know by saying this, people are going to go, well, I know so-and-so and so-and-so. You got to really work at it.
Right.
In the real world, in our world, relapse happens all the time. But in the residential world, where you get a good foundation, and I equate residential treatment to a baseline where you can take the drugs out of somebody and watch them over a period of 3, 6, 9 weeks, 12 weeks in some cases, depending on how long they can be in treatment, so you can get an idea of just what you're dealing with. Because so much of us go to treatment, as I did, not really knowing what our real issues are.
Right.
I mean, you know this. You hear people all the time who they claim to be bipolar, have anxiety, depression, when in reality it could be just the drugs and the alcohol they're consuming.
No question about it. And, we want to make sure everybody understands that residential treatment is so necessary for so many people. And there are so many great residential situations out there. When we participate in the decision, somebody needs residential treatment, not only do we know that they need residential treatment, we usually know the right place to send them, because everybody has their little niche in terms of what they're good at. And so it's age specific, gender specific, disease specific, all those things come into play. And so at Wellwyn, one of the things you get from us is our experience in matching facility to affected person. But having said that, 30 days doesn't fix anybody. Let me tell you something. If we could guarantee everybody being fixed in 30 days, we'd be shooting this on our yacht, which we had just flown our jet helicopter out to. Each one of us would have our own.
I didn't know we had one of those.
Well, we would if we could. If we could fix people in 30 days, we would be able to name our price. But that's not the way it works. And as Lewis said, 30 days is a cocoon. Every decision is made for you. They fill your day up. They try and instill discipline,
right,
as much as anything, because typically the drug addict or the alcoholic has lost any form of discipline, or if they're disciplined how they get high. Well, certainly know how to live effectively.
Well, and a lot of times, if it's your first stint in treatment, it does give you an idea as to how this process works. Introducing you to 12-step work, for instance, introducing you to therapy, which a lot of people take for granted. One of the big advantages I found when I waited to treatment was the group format, which I didn't appreciate then as I do now.
Right.
It to me is the building block around which my recovery really started and kept moving forward.
The things, the words, the phrase words, the key words, the magic words that we use all the time are honesty, but probably the thing, especially when I hear you talk about group, is accountability. Mm-hmm. You've got to be accountable to somebody besides yourself. You can be accountable to your God, your higher power, But you really need to surround yourself with people trying to accomplish what you're accomplishing. The beautiful thing about group is that it's usually 8 to 10, at least in Wellwyn. We try and keep our groups around 8 to 10 people, but that seems to be the perfect number where everybody can share and everybody gets to know everybody. But there's an accountability. We actually have seen in our groups the relationships that people will form these relationships, and it's just so important from an accountability perspective. When they have a problem, they actually have a chance to hire somebody or reach out to somebody besides us. And so they have a group accountability, I think, is so incredibly powerful. And we, in order to not get beyond the anonymity of our current clients, we've seen firsthand when a relapse happens that the person who relapsed will reach out to somebody else in the group because they feel comfortable in being honest with them.
Well, there's a term that I was taught a year or so ago by a gentleman who also runs a treatment center, and it's called the Therapeutic Alliance, which takes into account the bond that happens in group, not only between clients, but also between the therapist and the client, where it's kind of like the 1 + 1 = 3 theory, where you allow the group to have you, and that's where the honesty part comes into play. You serve up your issues and you let the group kind of help dissect what the issues are and how to deal with them, not just the therapist.
Right. How many times have I heard you say to people when we're working with them that it's a lot easier for me to fix somebody else's problem than it is for me to
Absolutely.
fix my own.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's what you see in group, is that you see these people all of a sudden develop a little bit of confidence because they all of a sudden realize they're not the only person going through this, what they're going through. And it is beautiful. But let's talk about the 12 months that you talked about earlier. What a perfect 12 months, not a perfect, but what a 12 months for us, what we try and get our clients to buy into when they come to Wellwyn and they're going to spend money with us. These are the things we ask them to do.
So, assuming they go to residential treatment, let's start there. So they go to residential treatment for, again, the stabilization process where they gain some insight into their addiction and also the process of recovery. They would come out, let's say, after 30 days, and then they would step down to an outpatient program like ours. Intensive outpatient, by definition, is 3 3-hour groups a week. Just take our program, for instance, is Tuesdays and Thursdays and Saturdays are our program. And then wrapped around that, you would also have individual therapy, families and or couples counseling, and then in that timeline, you would end up practicing things like mindfulness, meditation, possibly yoga, but you'd be gaining skills that up to this point you really haven't either done or had to do, because as we all know, unless you're mindful, which means in the moment, you are going to, at some point, you're going to be unmindful and it's going to slip up on you and you're going to relapse. And that's what we're trying to avoid.
Right. So let's say that you go through your first 30 days, you come out, you immediately, and we talk to treatment centers all the time who are trying to line up that next phase of recovery, which is intensive outpatient. And, typically, what's that, Lewis? That's 3 months?
Well, theoretically, yes. We would tell people to plan on a 90-day period. If something comes up in the meantime and you aren't able to complete it in 90 days, understand it could be longer. It can be shorter too. It really depends on the person's willingness and their motivation behind it. Most people in treatment, and I mean this most, I would say 90% of them don't want to be in treatment.
Yeah.
None of us want to be in treatment, right? I mean, we jokingly talk about the fact that no one walks in our front door with a smile on their face. They usually are forced in, coerced in. From time to time, you'll get the individual who recognizes they may have an issue. They may come in by themselves, but for the most part, there's a consequence that they've just gone through, and it's created this dynamic where they need the help and they recognize it, or somebody else recognizes it.
Yeah, and hopefully one of the other things that happens in the first 30 days is that they're detoxed.
Correct.
So that their body finally comes back to some kind of baseline where they're not being artificially raised up and down. That's what's so important. And that's the reason that detox is so important. But so you get into intensive outpatient. That's where the work really begins, right? So
you're in. This is real world. As I mentioned earlier, it's damn near impossible to relapse when you're in residential treatment. It is absolutely possible to relapse in outpatient.
Yeah.
Because you're in the real world. So, and not that we want people to relapse, but what we want them to do is to go through their life and bring their experiences into group and into individual sessions so that they can process those issues in real time. So when someone does relapse in our program, and that happens frequently, not with everybody, but it does happen frequently, how do you handle it? What was it you missed? So to your point, people ask, well, how long is the program? Well, the intensive outpatient part can be anywhere between 3 months and 6 months.
Yep.
It just depends on how readily you take to the treatment process. After that part of it, however, there is another component, which we refer to as relapse prevention and continuing care, which is fewer groups, 1 to 2 1.5 hour sessions a week, plus individual sessions continue, and all the other programs. But we want to tie people up. We tell them this up front. We want to tie them up for at least a year. And we've actually had several individuals that have been with us for up to 2 years because it became apparent that they either couldn't handle it on their own or they didn't want to handle it on their own. So they just feel safer in this environment.
Well, I think that one of the things that we talk about all the time, especially in group, when we're talking about relapse, is the relapse actually begins the first time you think about it.
Right.
It's not the first time you take a drink.
No.
That's the culmination of the relapse.
Right.
The start of the relapse is actually when you start negotiating with your subconscious. As you're sitting in group, and we've seen it happen a million times, you're starting to think, well, I wonder if I could have a beer. Vodka's not a problem. Beer's really not a problem. Beer's really not even alcohol. And so that's where it's so important, where the interaction in group, the constant individual counseling is so important to clean out that brain and say the things that you're really thinking about. Because, listen, it's catch and release, right? Our business is catch and release. I'm 63 years old. I'm sober 8 years. If I want to go down to the liquor store and get a bottle of liquor right now, there is not an army that can stop me. I can go do it if I want to, right? I got to maintain that vigilance that I'm not going to, and the reason I'm not going to is such a long. I mean, there's a little schedule of events in my head that I play through, whereas I know I get away with it because you can always get away with it. But then it starts the process that ended me up in the hospital. Right. We call it in AA jargon, we call it playing the tape out. And so I think that's one of the things that we see in group. We try and maintain. Everybody tries to maintain some accountability, and so that gets us through maybe the first 4, 5, 6 months. But then after that, you still have to be vigilant. The continuing care, which is once or twice a week, as well as the individual counseling, which is very, very important, all those things lend itself to continued sobriety. But we also, one of the things that we want to make sure and talk about is if you have another support, a lot of us, me personally, I know that was a big part of your early sobriety, Lewis, we use 12-step fellowships to supplement our program.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
But all those things are typically based around accountability, it's so important to be accountable to somebody besides yourself. And so those are the things that we look for in the continuing care. Listen, I just got an email from one of our clients or a text who's, he's doing phenomenal, but he needs constant nurturing, which I think is so important in early recovery. But listen, even at 8 years, I still will have events. I'm going through one now that would make having a drink seem like not such a bad idea, And so it's important, Here at Wellwind, one of the things if you come into our program, we consider you a client for life.
Exactly.
So if somebody reaches out to us in 5 years, 3 years, whatever, they're going to get the same product from us that they got when they were in here at the initial stage.
Well, think about this. We know that addiction, like cancer, diabetes, heart disease, is a chronic disease, which simply means it's treatable but never curable. So if you understand that concept, you realize that treatment literally is forever. It just takes on different forms. So the treatment up front with addiction, it doesn't look like it doesn't have the same feel as it does 4, 5, 10 years from now. But it's still there. That's one of the reasons that the 12-step fellowships are so vitally important, because it allows you to get a taste every once in a while that you go. And a lot of people still, you and I both know people who've been sober for decades that go every single day.
Oh, I've got one of my buddies, which I'll see next Monday. That's 57 years sober, and he still does 2 meetings a week. And he still speaks. He's one of the circuit speakers, and so he'll still run around. But he still knows that he's one bad decision away from going right back where he doesn't want to be. And so, listen. Here's the thing that we want to try and get across to you. Especially, here at Wellwind, when we take on a client, we try and educate the client as well as the family about the process. And so you do have residential treatment, intensive outpatient, continuing care, surround yourself with people that are in recovery. There's so many different things that make up a successful program of recovery, but it's all based on day-to-day performance. And it's not impossible for you to slip up and relapse. One of the things, especially here at Wellwind, that we want to make sure that we preach all the time is that a relapse is not failure. It's a learning experience. We try and use it as a learning experience so that we make sure and we don't lose anybody to the disease, because people sometimes seem to forget. And unfortunately, we have to remind them, and we're reminded constantly, this will kill you.
Very much so.
You can die from alcoholism. You can die from drug addiction.
So to that point, to illustrate this, after I got home last night at 11:30, I got an email from a woman who's probably 75, whose 41-year-old daughter was in an emergency room, and they had called the family to tell them to come because she was on life support. And it's just alcohol, no other drugs involved. So we deal with this on a daily basis. We've seen it. It's horrific, and it doesn't get any better unless you address it earlier in the process. And for whatever reason, this young lady never had it addressed to the extent she needed it addressed.
Yeah, it's
at 41.
I'm telling you, what we've seen people in their 30s that have significant liver damage, where they're actually turning yellow because.
Oh yeah.
And listen, I mean, alcohol will kill you. Continual misuse of alcohol, not that there is a quote prescribed use, it will kill you, and it will absolutely ruin your life. Not just your life, but it's the people. And golly, I mean, here we are at Christmas time, so I guess family is a little bit more important in our thoughts. But it is hard to sit there. The conversations we have when you see the parents or the siblings or the husband or the wife describe losing somebody they love and care so much about. And I'm not talking about them being dead. I'm just talking about them being completely moved into that world of alcoholism,
Right.
where they just lose touch. The line, the manipulation. We had one of our newer clients talked about how impossible it was for him to ever stop. The lies had become so many that he had to, as you know, if you tell one lie, then you have to tell two to make up for the first one, then you have to take four to make up the two. He was into the millions of lies that he was having to make just not to get caught. And it's just watching families break up, watching especially me. I know that I've impacted my 3 kids in their teenage years. My hope, my prayer is that they'll see it as a learning experience and it won't present in them later in life.
Well, hopefully you can use your experience as an example
Would
of
hope.
what not to do.
Yeah. That's the other thing is that there's a lot of people, a lot of good people out there in recovery doing a lot of really cool things. It just doesn't seem to be newsworthy.
Right.
Maybe one of the things that we'll do going forward is we'll identify people who have turned their lives around. I think those stories are far better than the ones who end up in jail or end up in the morgue.
Yeah.
And maybe that's one of the things that we should do with this podcast is that we should speak with people who have turned their life around, people who have committed themselves to making amends, not just to the people that they directly impacted, but actually making amends to society. Because I think we're all of us, when I'm sober and when I'm motivated, I can help people. And so all of those years where I wasn't, there's a lot of people I could have helped that didn't get the help.
So getting back to our topic of what does treatment look like, one of the things that, and this is one of the things that we do at Wellwyn, and what I would hope most good programs would do, would be to help people process their lives so that the lies that why do you lie? What is it you've told to whom? And what were the results of that? So we don't have to do that again. Because to your point, one lie leads to another one, leads to another one.
Yep.
And the sooner you can get honest about what you do and who you do it to, the sooner you will start healing. As we've mentioned, it's a brain disorder. You keep telling the brain one thing, and at some point it's going to believe it, good and bad. Our objective here at Wellwyn, and I hope at most treatment facilities, is to get the garbage on the table. One of the things that when I do come into the group and I address our clients, I want them to be at their worst when they're here. I don't want them coming in rainbows and unicorns. I want them to have just gotten fired from a job or their spouse left them. I want to see them at their worst, because then we can dig and dig and dig to figure out what happened, how do you deal with it? Because you and I both know that your problems are not going to go away by getting sober.
You know what? They don't. As a matter of fact, I would tell you that sobriety does nothing to the things that impact you on a day-to-day basis. Those things continue to come at you. What sobriety does allow you to do is address them in a different way.
Right.
Typically, you can mitigate with sober living. You can end problems. When you use alcohol and drugs, all you do is you put off the inevitable. And typically, problems that aren't addressed will magnify. And so when you finally do get sober, the problem is much greater than it would have been if you just handled it the first time. But you're right. I will tell you that just because you get sober, it's got nothing to do with how life treats you.
No.
Life comes at you, man. It does. And there's no rhyme or reason as to why this happens or why that happens. If we're going to spend our day trying to figure out why something happened, we're going to waste the rest of our lives. You know what you do? You have some purpose in life. You try and help as many people as you can. You're always trying to be honest, be accountable to somebody, and you just live day to day. I mean, that's what happens. And so if you're watching this podcast and you have somebody who needs some help, understand the process. Is identifying it, getting the person to at least own up to the fact that, listen, if you're drinking, and we this one case this week was illuminating for me. The person that we're talking about didn't drink every day, but when he did drink, which may have been, he may have only had something to drink every 2 or 3 weeks, but when he did drink, he drank to excess. We call him a binge drinker.
Right.
That person's just as much an alcoholic as the guy who wakes up and drinks like me, who drinks all day long. If you're using alcohol for the effect, then you got an issue.
Yep.
If you're using alcohol to make you feel differently about yourself, you're going to need some kind of help. And
to your point earlier, there are plenty of people out there who can drink responsibly. In fact, the bulk of people who consume alcohol drink responsibly.
Oh yeah, no question about it. But the ones who don't they need help. And the process is something that we have spent a bunch of time. I would say that there's not a lot of new information out there, but there are people there's a lot better. The number of facilities designed to help these problems. About 5 or 6 years ago, it's about before I went to school actually, one of the things that finally happened is the substance abuse people and the mental health people finally got on the same page and agreed that they call them co-occurring disorders. They need to be addressed at the same time. There was a fight forever in the early days of the recovery industry, where the thought process was, well, you have to get them sober and then you can deal with the mental illness, or you have to get them, deal with the mental illness and then you can deal with the alcohol. Well, you can't separate.
No.
We know for a fact that typically if somebody's drinking, there's something else they're drinking about. Alcohol does not start out as the problem. It starts out as the way you're addressing the problem. But alcohol being as devious as it is, eventually alcohol will become the problem.
And drugs.
Especially drugs.
Yeah.
And what we should say is substances. Any substance that you're using that alters the way you feel about yourself is addictive. It could become highly addictive. And they usually will destroy your life. And I'm not talking about just physically. I'm talking about spiritually.
Mm-hmm.
It'll destroy your quality of life. And so we're always amazed, working here at Wellwind, just when you think things are going to calm down, they'll come out of the woods. Come out of the woods. And the stories are horrific sometimes.
Well, we've talked about this, but the coronavirus issue has done nothing but point out what has been going on for a long, long time. The isolation that comes with the coronavirus, we're going to see this problem for decades. It will not be over with. It was interesting. I found this cute cartoon on when I was traveling last night. It had a picture of the coronavirus and a pill. They were talking to each other, and the pill said, "You force them inside, I'll take care of the rest."
That's right. It's the truth, but and the last thing a drug addict or alcoholic needs is another reason to use, but the coronavirus has become the reason that everything happens these days.
Yeah.
Everything. And so it's just created a whole new reason why you can do what everybody knows you shouldn't be doing. And so, what we would hope, especially right here at holiday time when there's families are coming together, recognize the people that you love that are around you. Recognize they have a problem and don't let them get by with it. If you need some help with the conversation, reach out to us. We do that all the time.
Yeah.
But if you don't reach out to us, reach out to somebody.
Please.
Because I will tell you that it only gets worse. There is no such thing as staying pat. You don't stand pat with alcoholism or drug addiction. It continues to get worse.
Well, and if you're a family member, you're ill-equipped to handle it because you're emotionally attached to it. We take the emotion out of it. Although we are empathetic, we have no skin in the game, so to speak. So we can look at it objectively, and for the most part, we know what we're doing. And so...
Reach out to us. You can get me at mmoy@wellwind.com or lfinch@wellwind.com. I know Terry will put our website, our email addresses, and our website on the broadcast. But reach out because we're ready to help you. To be quite, it's funny. I was trying to think One of the conversations we had this week, and we were talking about purpose. So many people who use and who drink lose their purpose in life. Mm-hmm. And one of the guys asked me, he says, well, why do you do this? I said, well, it gives me purpose. And you know what he said? He said, I can see that in your face.
I noticed that. I remember that, yeah.
Yeah, I can see that in your face. And I was like, that's because it's true. You know, it's not something that you fake.
No.
It's not something that you fake. And we know that the next wave of people who can help people are the ones who are right now in trouble. Mm-hmm. If we can convert enough alcoholics and drug addicts, then we create, in our army of recovery, we create new troops to go out there and find people to help. We have a young man that we took down to treatment, I don't know, it's probably been 4 or 5 months ago, and it's been so cool to watch his progress. We both just got a text from him this morning, and he has decided to relocate to Florida, where the recovery community is something that he feels so strongly about. Yeah. He's going to start living down there. Yeah. Now, there's a guy who got the religion, man, you know, and that's neat to find. Unfortunately, we also have our share of guys who disappear, and we hear about them. They're back on the street, or they're in the morgue, or they're in jail, or whatever. And so this is not a game. It's real life.
Exactly.
And the consequences are so real. And so what we ask is that if you see somebody that needs help, help them find it. Call us, reach out to us. We'll be more than happy to lend our expertise. Whatever talent, when you talk about Macon and Lewis, when you talk about Macon and Lewis, talent's not one of the words that floats to the top of your mind, but we do have talent. At least we convince ourselves that we have talent. But I will tell you that there's no question that our effort to help you will be there. Wellwin is here to help people. That's what we do. So Lewis, any closing thoughts?
Well, no, ironically, we have, I just got a text, we have a family waiting for us in our family room right now.
Well, that's fantastic. You know what?
So
we hope everybody has a, we'll talk to you again next week. Reach out to us if you have something that you want to find out about. We're a resource for people out there in trouble, in substance abuse, or even mentally ill people. Reach out to us and we'll do what we can to help you. In the meantime, we hope that everybody has a nice Christmas. And thanks for watching.
We can be back before Christmas, aren't we?
We should be, but you never say never.
That's true. Good point.
Never say never. And so I'm Macon.
I'm Lewis.
And we're the
Recovery Boys.
Listen, thanks everybody. Go to therecoveryboys.com. This show will be posted quickly. Terry, our crack team here, will make sure that it gets out. Terry's amazing. And we will see you again next week on the Recovery Boys. Lewis?
Thank you, Macon.
Thank you, Lewis.
I will
and
see you
thank
next
you, buddy.
week.
All right. Thanks so much.
Guys. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
You've been listening to The Recovery Boys. Visit the Recovery Boys website at therecoveryboys.com. We thank you for listening to The Recovery Boys.